To the Turn On Your Inner Light show. It's time to stop just surviving, and it's time to begin to thrive. It's time to live happier and healthier. Turn stress into strength. Noted author Debbie Mandel will show you how to move beyond personal doubts and fears and into positive perception to turn on your inner light. Here's your host, Debbie Mandel.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to my show. Our guest expert is Eric Maisel, Ph.D., author of 40 books, featured blogger for Psychology Today and the Huffington Post, creativity coach, and the author of Rethinking Depression. Are you sad or depressed? You get to choose. Welcome, Eric.
Hi, Debbie. Great to be with you.
Now, what's the difference between depression and unhappiness?
I'm saying that there is no such thing as depression, the mental disorder of depression, that it's just a label that you get after a certain kind of transaction, where you walk into a mental health professional's office feeling unhappy or in anguish or in despair, feeling one of those, so to speak, normal human things, and you're handed back a certain mental disorder label. So I'm saying depression is really just a label, and buyer beware here. You want to make sure you really want to buy this label before accepting it.
Is there no such thing as a clinical depression? I realize what you're saying about being overly diagnosed. In fact, doesn't the American Psychological Association want to classify grief as a disorder?
Yes, I think we have to be fair and clear here. It's the American Psychiatric Association, not the Psychological Association.
Okay.
I think, in fact, the American Psychological Association is fighting that. But you're right. The new manual for diagnosing that is supposed to come out in 2013 will be providing us with scores and scores of new mental disorders created out of whole cloth by folks sitting around in a room. And grief used to be a depression exemption, and they want to turn grief into a mental disorder. Yes, you're right.
So, but is there such a thing as clinical depression?
I don't think so, because for there to be that thing, I think three things would have to obtain. First, there'd have to be a definition of mental disorder that makes sense to some fair-minded person. We'd have to have some definition that makes some sense. Second, we would need some explanations of causes rather than just descriptions of symptoms. As you know, these things are diagnosed just on the basis of symptom pictures without any explanations needed. And third, we'd need some way to distinguish between predictable human reactions to life versus something pseudo-medical sounding. I don't think we have any of those three things. So I don't think it's fair to say that there is any such thing as a clinical depression.
So someone with bipolar disorder or obsessive-compulsive disorder might not have concomitant depression and might not be unable to climb out of the abyss?
It's really hard to say, isn't it? I think one of the things that we want to say here is that the things called antidepressants are chemicals with real effects, and you may want those effects. So I'm not saying that you may not want the things that mental health professionals provide. They provide two things, chemicals and talk. And you may want those chemicals because you may be suicidal, you may be in a deep abyss, and you may want the positive effects those chemicals provide, and you may want the good talk that a warm therapist can provide. You may want those things. But that's different from saying that antidepressants are medication for an illness. They are chemicals with effects. And that's a very different thing.
So are antibiotics.
Exactly. Well, I think antibiotics come closer to what we think of as medicine for treating something. When you're provided with an explanation as to what the medicine is treating, then I think it makes some sense to call it medicine. It's sort of the difference between marijuana as a medication for glaucoma versus marijuana for getting high. They're two different ways of conceptualizing what's going on there. In the first case, in the second case, you're wanting the effect of getting high. In the first case, you're trying to treat something. And I think that's a real difference that gets obscured in the mental health debate.
Would you say if someone gets evaluated for clinical depression, that would constitute the same thing as someone saying you have a bacterial infection because your circuitry, your brain circuitry is never shutting off, or you're having a chemical imbalance in the brain?
I think that's a very reasonable thing to ask your provider. And what you will discover is that your provider has no tests to run, because he or she doesn't really believe that there's a biological underpinning of the sort you just named. There are no tests to run for depression. You would think that if they thought it was a medical illness of some sort, if it really was about serotonin uptake or one of the things that they say it's about, well, then they'd run a test to see if you're the person with that thing. But they don't do that because I think they understand that they're really dealing with things like you hating your job and you having trouble with your relationship and maybe you evaluating life as negative, all sorts of things that are not medical.
Well, you know that until recently, Alzheimer's never had a test. In fact, it was just familial perceptions and the observation of the psychiatrist or the neurologist. Yet Alzheimer's is very real and has causes that we are only beginning to understand. I think we know very little about the brain, relatively speaking.
That's right, and I think, therefore, that we ought not to say that we know something before we do. I'm happy to agree with you that we may learn tons more, but I don't think we learn it, I don't think we know it now. And we also have to make sure that we understand cause and effect when we talk about something. It may be that we're very unhappy, and that reduces our serotonin level. So, of course, maybe you can find a reduced serotonin level, but it wasn't the reduced serotonin level that made you unhappy. It was your unhappiness that reduced your serotonin level. If we don't get the direction of causality right, then we're playing another sort of game.
And when you think about it, if someone is sad, as you make a very good point in the book, and we don't like to feel discomfort.
That's
of course,
right.
Here's the pill for you. But there are people who cannot get out of bed, who, as you said, are suicidal.
Exactly.
And we can't discuss existentialism with someone like that at that point.
I 100% agree.
So the medication might, or the marijuana.
Yeah, I would say the chemicals. I mean, I can't, dispute you're using the word medication. I would just say you may want those chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly right. And you absolutely want to go, even if you half doubt what a mental health provider is providing, you still want to see them because they're the ones dispensing the chemicals and dispensing the talk. So they are the right people to go to, even if it's an odd transaction, and even if you do have to beware about what's being sold to you, they are still the right people to go to. Similarly,
we're going to go to commercial break, and we will return with Dr. Eric Maisel, author of Rethinking Depression.
Now you can take Debbie Mandel home with you. Her book, Turn On Your Inner Life, Fitness for Body, Mind, and Soul, will help you decompress with healthy, positive, concrete solutions. Common life challenges are presented so that you can quickly find the help you need. Emotional tips, original meditations, and a fun and easy-to-follow fitness workout for each mindset. This revolutionary new method will help you rewire mind and body to take back your power. Get it on Amazon.
Are you overwhelmed with the burden of taking care of children, parents, or both? Are you taking care of everyone else except yourself? It's time to change your habits and re-energize. Debbie Mandel gives you an innovative and easy-to-follow program for good health and happiness. In her magical new book, Changing Habits, The Caregiver's Total Workout, Debbie Mandel shows you step-by-step how to find the optimal balance between giving and receiving and guides you to exercise and eat right to take care of yourself. What are you waiting for? Read Changing Habits and start training for your life. Life does not need to be a burden. Get Changing Habits, The Caregiver's Total Workout on Amazon.
You're listening to the Turn On Your Inner Light show. I'm your host, Debbie Mandel, and I'm speaking with Dr. Eric Maisel, author of Rethinking Depression. Now, a lot of your book hinges on the philosophy of existentialism. I never thought of existentialism as a particularly cheerful philosophy. So I'm wondering how that really leads us to stabilizing the thought that my life sucks.
Well, I think that most people don't actually make the distinction internally between happiness and unhappiness. That's not exactly where they want to live their life. It's rather that they want to make themselves proud. That's often what's missing from their life, and the reason they feel like they're going through the motions is that they're not doing the things that make themselves proud. I think that's where existentialism is strong. It tells you to take personal responsibility for your life, asks you to make meaning rather than continually look around for meaning. And so I think that if you form strong intentions and align your thoughts with those intentions and align your behaviors with those intentions, then you're living a life that's much closer to the one you had always hoped to live, and that actually reduces your experience of unhappiness and makes you feel happier.
Sometimes it's hard to know the life that you hope to live because we're a product of our culture, our parental unit, our genetic legacy. Sometimes, and don't forget the magazines. So
right.
I don't know how we even sift through the core.
I have a certain kind of language about that, and that's the language of meaning opportunities. I think there may be a score of meaning opportunities that human beings have found often provoke the experience of meaning in them, service being one, relationships being another, creating being another, stewardship being another, etc., etc. But I don't think there are hundreds and thousands of these categories. I think there are maybe a score of strong categories. So if you recognize that you don't have to put all of your meaning in one basket, that there are lots of different kinds of meaning opportunities, and you could spend an hour of your day relating, and an hour of your day creating, and an hour of your day, etc., etc. If you look at life that way, then you don't have to land on the purpose of life or the purpose of your life. You can take it more as a buffet, so to speak, and decide that there are lots of meaning opportunities, and you'll decide which couple you'll seize today.
You know, when people ask me why I'm happy, okay, because I tend to be cheerful, annoyingly cheerful. I'm being straightforward about it. I say to them, I'm above ground. I say that I'm looking at shoots and not at roots. I have a positivity bias.
That's right. You've evaluated life as worth living. Somehow you've made that evaluation. And in a way, I think that's a choice. Of course, partly it's not a choice. If we get battered by life a lot, then we stop evaluating life as being really worthwhile, and we think of it as more as a cheat than as something worthwhile. But I do think it's partly a choice, and it's partly our task to evaluate life as worth living. If we don't do that, we're going to be blue in the background all the time. That's going to be our basic coloration. It's going to be sadness if we've evaluated life as wanting.
I think that premise is important. I think it's also important for people to note that life is a series of recoveries, and you try to enjoy the interim and to consciously create, as you're very much a proponent of your life story. So it's a movie I create in my head.
That's right.
It's perception driven, and I want to create a better movie. I will reframe whatever's going on with a different spin than someone who is disappointed or perhaps had unrealistic expectations.
That's right. And let me just piggyback one thought on that, and that is we're mistaken about meaning in the following sense. Somehow, without really thinking about it, we think we need it all the time. But in fact, we only need some minutes or hours of meaning each day, and the rest of the day can be in meaning neutral or vacation from meaning. We don't have to pester ourselves about meaning all the time. If you spend a good 2 hours doing something that amounts to a meaning opportunity for you, well, you can spend the next 2 hours running errands or doing whatever and not pestering yourself about the meaningfulness of those activities. When a person gets a little clearer that they can take vacations from meaning, then the whole question of meaning sort of reduces its intensity.
And then you don't get driven by, well, I'm not performing or accomplishing my meaning, which
exactly
is our time period. And I'm going to tell you that there are many other factors that have to go into that, and that's reflection. Our time period is one of technology overload, and we don't reflect anymore. We don't take it down. We don't just accomplish for ourselves. We are driven to find our meaning in our families. So, and you know what? I think you need to make the case for exercise. I think exercise is a great drug for depression.
Absolutely. It's one of the 2 or 3 best home remedies, along with sunlight and showers. There are some things that seem to work, on just on a simple biological level to reduce our experience of sadness.
So if I'm physically not balanced because I'm not working out, I'm not following, let's say, a Mediterranean diet with my omega-3s and all the other good things, how can I be happy? How can I even approach the meaning of my life?
That's right.
It's got to be rooted in some kind of strategies that you know, if you don't want to take a pill,
That's
well,
right.
then go work out.
And you have to treat your life as a project. And one of the things I suggest to clients is they take just half a minute or a minute when their day starts thinking about what meaning investments they want to make on that day. Just being more mindful, as you say. One meaning investment might be in exercise. Another might be in meditation. But if you don't think through your day first thing, then you're just going to get on that horse you're always on and rush through the day. So that first minute of the day can be your most important minute of the day.
Well, I agree with you. I take 5 minutes. What I do is I set my clock 5 minutes earlier so that I can reflect while I'm still in bed, and I can take control of my day instead of it controlling me, even though I have to get up perhaps and work.
That's exactly right.
So what is existential intelligence? I was very piqued by that because we have emotional intelligence. But think about that for a moment, and we're going to commercial break, and we will return with Dr. Eric Maisel, author of Rethinking Depression. Dear listeners, I'm excited to tell you about my new book, Addicted to Stress. This is a message you need to hear. Are you addicted to stress? Do you do it all while everyone depends on you? Where's all this pressure coming from? It is coming from inside you. This is why my publisher, John Wiley, asked me to write Addicted to Stress, a woman's 7-step program to reclaim joy and spontaneity in life. This fun-to-read book teaches proven strategies to reclaim your life, silence your inner critic, build a healthy body, and reframe your thoughts to change your life for the better. Dare to be happy without the guilt. Addicted to Stress is easy to get. It's available at Barnes & Noble and other fine bookstores everywhere. You can also buy it at Amazon and other online retailers. We're back with Dr. Eric Maisel, author of Rethinking Depression. All right, so what is existential intelligence?
Well, it's a construct, of course. We don't really know how to talk about intelligence, and there are two different ways. We used to talk about it as a unitary thing, like an IQ score. And then when multiple intelligence came along, when Howard Gardner's ideas came along, then we started thinking about multiple intelligences. Gardner thought that maybe there was something to add to his multiple intelligences called existential intelligence, but he wasn't sure really how to conceptualize it. The way I think about it is there must be some piece of us, some part of our mind, some intelligence that allows us to decide what matters. That's different from our artistic intelligence or kinesthetic intelligence or any of the other intelligences. There must be a coordinating intelligence that allows us to decide that this matters more than that matters. And I suspect that we can tap into that if we recognize that we have that capability. So it's an abstract concept. It may or may not exist, but I think it's a useful construct to help us think about our ability to think about what matters to us.
Is that like the observer self? You know, when I'm mindful, I realize that, hey, I'm talking to Dr. Eric Maisel now.
Exactly. I think if we don't have that ability to, so to speak, step outside of ourselves, then we're actually not present. And there's some paradox there where we think that when we're present, we're not also stepping outside of ourselves. But I think there's a special quality of true presence where we're making decisions on an existential level, decisions about what matters, even in the moment as we're living.
See, the problem I have with this is that there's a part of existentialism that reduces everything we do to absurdity. And, you choose this or that. I think in existentialism you can get paralyzed with choosing. And The Stranger, for instance, by Camus, always was the book to show how really didn't work for the character because he's being executed, unless, of course, well, those are his consequences, of course, and how society judges us. I think life is such an intricate tapestry that the existentialists didn't strike me as being very joyous, happy people who functioned well.
No, I think they stopped short of actually thinking through what a kind of reconstructive existentialism would be. They deconstructed everything. They broke things up into their constituent parts and looked at things, I think, pretty closely and pretty clearly. But then they didn't think through what the next steps were. I'm hoping that in this kind of updated existentialism, I get to look at the next steps, which include ideas like value-based meaning-making. That is, understanding what our values and principles are, and then just living in a kind of, so to speak, normal way, in a daily way, our principles and values. I think that's how we experience joy in life, is understanding that we are standing up for our values and our principles.
I think that's transmitted in every school that we attend, in every house of worship. It's up to us to see is that working for me? Is it hypocritical? Should I mean,
that's right.
It's very complicated to me to come up with. I need to have kind of a handle on it. I think when we speak of a life of balance, people get it.
Yeah, let me give you a quick example. I don't know if we have time, and I hope I'm quick enough, but...
If not, I'll cut you off.
Yeah, so I talk about creating a life purpose vision and a life purpose statement for exactly the reasons that you're saying. It's too complicated to hold all of the things I'm saying somewhere. We have to reduce it to something simpler. And so an elementary school teacher was reading my work on meaning making and decided she'd try it with her third graders, try to help them understand what making meaning means. So she took them to a nearby river bed and had them each get a pretty fair-sized stone and had them write, with whatever those art supplies are, one word that would stand for their intention for the school year. Write it on the stone and then keep the stone on their desk for the year. And she said it made a huge difference in their ability to concentrate, that they could remind themselves just by looking at their stone how they were intending to be. So
well, that's a lovely thought.
I think
I have to close now with that love, but it is a lovely thought, and it's simple, and we can all implement that. Create a business card with your intention. Thank you so much for being a wonderfully good sport and for educating us on authenticity.
Thank you, Debbie.
Affirmation of the week. Make sure the effect you're having is the effect you want to have. And now for the latest medical trends. People with mild vascular disease that causes damages to the retina in the eye are more likely to have problems with thinking and memory skills because they may also have vascular disease in the brain, according to a study in neurology. And I thought this was particularly cute. 93% of overweight doctors failed to record their patients' obesity. At least they're not being hypocritical. And from UCLA, a team of academic researchers has identified the intracellular mechanisms regulated by vitamin D3 that may help the body clear the brain of amyloid beta, the main component of plaques associated with Alzheimer's disease. The early findings show that vitamin D3 may activate key genes and cellular signaling networks to help stimulate the immune system to clear the amyloid beta protein. Would it were so. And while I'm on the subject of vitamin D, it's associated with a lower risk of developing stress fractures in pre-adolescent and adolescent girls, especially those who are very active in high-impact activities. This is from pediatrics and adolescent medicine. In most cases, your profile photo on Facebook tells viewers what they need to know to form an impression of you. No words are necessary, according to new research. So make sure your photo speaks for itself. Chronic stress has a more powerful effect on the brain during adolescence than in adulthood. And now there's proof at the molecular level, according to findings published by University of Buffalo researchers. Married adults who undergo heart surgery are more than 3 times as likely as single people who have the same surgery to survive the next 3 months. I think they should qualify a happy marriage. A bad marriage isn't going to make you feel better after surgery. And the Food and Drug Administration are looking into the inhalable caffeine product called AeroShot. They are not sure that it does what it's supposed to do and may be inhaled into the lungs, and we don't know how harmful it could be to our children. Be careful. Well, we come to the close of another show. I have an educational website on stress management and healthy living, totally free, at turnonyourinnerlight.com. All the radio shows with the guest experts are archived there for your listening pleasure. And all the radio shows are YouTube driven. You just go into my site and you'll find them on YouTube to listen at your leisure. Subscribe to my free newsletter at turnonyourinnerlight.com, and you will receive a fresh new article on stress management, the health tips fully delineated, and, of course, the latest interview emailed directly to you. Have a wonderful week, and see you on the radio.